Welcome. I'm Fran Burwell. I'm one of the vice presidents here at the Atlantic Council, and I run the Transatlantic Relations program. As most of you know, the Atlantic Council has a long and very active commitment to a Europe whole, free, and at peace. And so we are delighted here to welcome today our guest, European Commissioner Johannes Hahn, the Commissioner for Neighborhood Policy and Enlargement Negotiations. Since 1989, the enlargement of NATO and the EU has reshaped the European continent. As Central Europe moved into the European institutions, the EU has rightly turned its attention to its new border states, both to the south and east. But our focus here this afternoon will be the Eastern Partnership and its future at a time of great challenge. For a while, after its founding in 2009, the EAP flew below the radar, I think it's fair to say. No one quite sure how effective it would be or what impact it would have. But by the time of the Vilnius Summit in November 2013, it was clear that the EAP and the partner countries now faced a real threat. President Putin of Russia had come to see the Eastern Partnership as an avenue through which the partners might integrate with the West, something that he certainly opposed. At Vilnius, the first result of this challenge was the refusal of the Yanukovych government to sign the association accord. The second was the Maidan. 18 months later, the EU has just held the Riga Summit to chart a way forward for the EAP in the wake of the momentous events since Vilnius, including the dismemberment of Ukraine and the pressures put on others in the partnership to slow or reverse their movement towards Europe. This was the challenge for the Riga Summit. How has the EU responded? What was it realistic to expect at Riga? And has it been enough to set the EAP on a new course, one that we hope will bring the partners greater stability, security, prosperity, and democracy? Commissioner Hahn is perhaps the central figure in the European Commission dealing with the EAP and the Riga Summit. In a moment, he will be introduced, but let me first recognize the presence of Ambassador Razins of Latvia. Latvia was the host of the Riga Summit and made it a key part of its EU presidency. The Latvian government has also been a strong partner of the Atlantic Council as we have pursued work on a transatlantic partnership towards Europe's east during this part of your presidency. So thank you, Ambassador Razins, and thank you also to the other European ambassadors who are here tonight. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Ambassador David O'Sullivan, the ambassador of the European Union to the US. Ambassador O'Sullivan was previously the Chief Operating Officer at the European External Action Service, and so very much involved in the management of the EAP both during and after the Vilnius Summit. He will do us the great honor of introducing our guest this afternoon, and then I'll be back to moderate the discussion.
Fran, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, and it's a very great pleasure and honor for me to be able to say a few brief words of introduction of Commissioner Johannes Hahn before he gives us his presentation. I'd like to thank the Atlantic Council, and particularly Fran, for the excellent cooperation which has gone into organizing this evening, and I'd like to echo her words of thanks to my friend and colleague Andris Razan, the ambassador of Latvia, for the excellent work that he's done here and the strong commitment of the Latvian presidency to the Eastern Partnership and what Andris has done to give the Eastern Partnership a strong profile in Washington during that particular presidency. Commissioner Hahn has responsibility for neighborhood policy and enlargement, which frankly, given all that is happening in Europe today, is probably one of the most challenging responsibilities and portfolios in the current European Commission. You know that commissioners are not allowed to have nationality, so I can't say that he's an Austrian. The country that he knows best, I believe, is Austria. Where he was very active in the private sector, in regional politics, and then in national politics before joining the European Commission in 2010 as Commissioner for Regional Policy, where I can testify to the very important role he played in developing regional policy, reshaping it in the context of the new budgetary perspectives 2014 to 2020 and the legal basis and architecture for that policy going into this Commission. He has benefited from that experience because he also manages a very significant budget in this new context of over some 15 billion euros of neighborhood policy budget, which will cover our relations with the neighbors. The main reason for his visit to Washington was actually to engage with the international financial institutions, and in particular to promote better coordination between the activities of the different financial institutions in the neighborhood, and in particular on the question of conditionality. But he has had also extensive meetings at the Department of State. He will go to the White House tomorrow and on the Hill. And of course, he joins us only a few days after brokering a very successful mission to Skopje, where he was played very instrumental in trying to bring a solution to the difficult problems facing that particular country. Tonight, however, he's going to focus on one important aspect of his portfolio, namely the Eastern Partnership and the Riga Summit. And I'm sure we all look forward to hearing his assessment of that summit and the way forward for the Eastern Partnership. Commissioner Hahn, it's a great honor to introduce you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, David, Madam, thank you very much for these very friendly words. Indeed, we managed to find an agreement with our friends in Skopje about the future, the hopefully Euro-Atlantic future of the country, but we will see what are the next days, because the deal is not yet 100% there, but I think in general we are on a good path. But I have been asked to give you some reflections, at least from my point of view, about the Riga Summit and the way forward after the Riga Summit. Of course, it's always about expectations when we are talking about a summit. Now we have the G7 summit, and the only thing I can hear is that there are 30,000 demonstrations. So this is, don't know if this is the expectation, but less about content. And so I think it's about the expectations, which are always created. And may I say, of course, the host country was making a great job. There were a lot of expectations, I have to say. But I also would use the opportunity to thank Latvia for not only hosting this event, but indeed for creating an atmosphere which enabled us to speak, I personally speak about the success there. Why? I will come to the content, the substance a little bit later, but it's important to say that there were 3 side events. I would call them not only side events, these were main events. Why? Because there were 3 conferences, one for the civil society, one for the media, and one for the business community. And these are the core players, if you like, in the Eastern neighborhood. It's the civil society, which we need there, which we have to support them. That's why, by the way, we have increased our budget for the support of civil society organizations in the Eastern neighborhood by 20%. It's the business community, which is important in order to improve the living conditions, to attract foreign investors, to have better performances, and an attractive country has also an impact on the rule of law and fundamentals. And finally, freedom of media is another element, is another puzzle in an overall picture, which creates expectations in a positive way, meaning that these countries can move really towards Europe. And this is why I hesitate and why I believe that those who have written or said this summit was a failure probably have written their commentaries already before the event. And once again, it's about the expectations. And I prefer to see and to define this kind of summits more as a stock-taking event, as an opportunity to look every 2 years what has been achieved over the past 2 years, what are the new ideas for the future. And when Eastern Neighborhood Policy was designed, if you like, 6-7 years ago, probably at that time there was a different view, a different expectation about the development of these 6 countries. We are talking, by the way, about Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia. So these are the 6 countries which are covered by this Eastern Partnership approach. my understanding was always it was not an action against Russia. And this was also what has been expressed probably by all the interlocutors and those who took the floor during the summit. It's about cooperation in the region. There's a lot of potential there, and it should be our joint interest to lift all these opportunities which are definitely in the region. And this is why I would like to refer a little bit about the reforms, the activities we have launched in Vilnius 2 years ago, and where we really can report about the achievements and the way forward. First of all, Riga also should be seen as a part or an opportunity to discuss more widely the revision and the further evolvement of our neighborhood policy in general. I have been asked to present, so to say, a revision of our neighborhood policy within 1 year after coming into office, so we will be there in October, early November. We have presented, we means Federica Mogherini, the High Representative, Vice President, and myself, a draft for a revised neighborhood policy early in March. We are still in the public consultation process, which will end up by the end of June. And then we will, so to say, rewrite our draft and come forward with a communication, as I said, by the end of October. And there are 4 keywords which are describe, I think, very precisely also our relationship, our individual relationship with our 6 partners in the East. First, it's about differentiation. Second, it's about focusing. Third, it's about flexibility. And fourth, it's about ownership. What does it mean? I think we have to acknowledge that the 6 countries have different views how to shape their relationship with the European Union. What are their interests? But of course, we have to match it with our interests. And the interest of the European Union is peace, stability, and prosperity in its neighborhood. This, by the way, applies for the East as well as for the South. And only to give you one figure expressing, so to say, our concerns and why this is our main objective. In our neighborhood, we are facing the situation that there are around 20 million refugees or internal displaced people. In the south, it's about 16, and in the east, it's about 4 million. And keeping in mind, if all these 20 millions would try to move to Europe, what it would mean for Europe and the whole situation in the European Union. That's why it's our, so to say, top priority to give people in the region a perspective, not to force them to move, give them an economic perspective in order to stay there and to have a perspective for themselves. So this is our aim. And then we have to see what is the aim of our partners. Of course, our neighborhood countries are facing also a relationship with the other neighbor. It's about Russia, and there are different views on that, and this has to be respected. And over the years, there is a certain evolvement, and the evolvement means that 3 out of the 6 have clearly expressed and repeated again and again their European perspective. Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia has clearly expressed their final goal to become a member of the European Union. This is not the case in, how to say, predictable future, but it's something we have to respect, we have to accept, and we have to deal with. Armenia and Azerbaijan have expressed to work with us also on a contractual basis. Armenia was ready to sign a DCFTA, a deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with the Union. In the very last moment, they decided not to sign up. and because they joined, or they were forced, invited, however you might call it, to join the Eurasian Union. But at the same time, they clearly said they would like to have also a kind of contractual cooperation with us. And I think this is the difference maybe to Russia. We are not reacting black and white. So to say, if you are with the Eurasian Union, it's not possible to be with us. No, it's the opposite. I think it could be a test case to demonstrate that it's possible to be member of the Eurasian Union, but also to explore what could be the scope of cooperation with the European Union. And we have just concluded our scoping or screening exercise with Armenia, and 2 weeks ago, a few days before the summit, we have submitted our report to the European Council, and I expect that we will receive very soon a mandate as European Commission to negotiate with, as an external action service, to negotiate with Armenia a possible contractual cooperation. And the same applies for Azerbaijan. Also, they have received a proposal how a possible cooperation could look like. And even Belarus has indicated to have a more deepened relationship with us. But of course, there are some stumbling blocks which have to overcome, and where we are pretty clear. It's about political prisoners. But I'm saying this to tell you we have to find tailor-made solutions for our neighbors. And that's why the bilateral relationship is by far more important than, if you like, the general term Eastern Partnership. It's about the bilateral relationship and the shape this relationship can have. And this is the first keyword: differentiation. By the way, the same applies, of course, for our southern neighborhood. You cannot compare Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco. One can compare it, but not in the way they would like to shape and to structure their relationship with us. So here we have to be flexible also in our own interest. About focusing means to concentrate on few areas which are important for us, but also for them. In the current situation, of course, it's security. It's about fighting against terrorism. I mean, here we are in the same boat, no doubt about it. Security, but also means energy security. Also here we have to see how we can improve our situation. And in Vilnius, for instance, we clearly have agreed and decided to diversify our sources of energy supply and to have a diversification of energy sources, but also of supply chains. And this has been already implemented. During this winter, it was for the first time that there could be gas supplied to Ukraine from Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland as a reaction when there have been some discussions and events with Russia on this issue, and we could demonstrate that we have introduced what we call interconnectors and other devices enabling this kind of supply. By the way, we are doing the same at the Western Balkan. One of our main activities in regional cooperation at the Western Balkan is energy supply. And of course, the whole stimulation of the economy is another area, and mobility of people is a further topic which is, of course, of utmost interest. And I'm happy to say that we also offered our neighbors nowadays the opportunity to join some of our programs, Horizon 2020, our research program, which is important for the future of many of our neighbors, to join our research activities. The same concerns COSME, a program which is dealing with the support of SMEs. So there is a lot we have already achieved. Very important is, for instance, when it comes to economy, but further to the whole rule of law development, the introduction of the DCFTAs and the agreements we could reach with Georgia and Moldova, and finally also with Ukraine. And if you look into the export figures of Moldova and Ukraine in the past couple of months, there is a double-digit increase of export to the European Union. But one could say this kind of agreement is a gigantic fitness program for a country, because the country has to comply with European standards, regulations, etc. So it's a particular challenge, and this is why we have provided 200 millions in cash in order to allow the provision of grants for SMEs and in the three countries, so that we expect overall volume of loans in the magnitude of €2 billion in order to help SMEs to accommodate with the challenges of DCFTA. Once again, mobility, there were a lot of discussions concerning visa-free regime for countries like Georgia, Ukraine. We are not yet there, but I am rather confident that by the end of the year, if things continue as it looked in the past, in the very recent past, it might be possible that by the end of the year the Commission is able to report positively to the Council, and then we will see what are the political decisions on this issue. So once again, I think beside the political aspect, and this is not something we can underestimate, I think it's important to focus ourselves in our relationship on very concrete projects. And that's why we need this tailor-made approach, we need this focusing on a few areas, we need a necessary flexibility in order to address new events. In the European Union, we are talking about a multi-annual financial framework which covers 7 years, and within 7 years many things can occur, and therefore we have to react financially but also institutionally, and therefore we need a certain improved and increased flexibility. And finally, and this is very important, it's about ownership. Our partners, and that's why I'm stressing that the word partner, should understand they are partners on an equal level field. And it's not a one-way road that like development aid, we are providing money, we are spending money, and the money is used more or less good, but it's about ownership. It should be understood as a mutual activity. The countries should be ready to engage with us. They should define what is their scope of activities. They should together with us choose the areas, the projects, the activities. I think we should even more stress the sub-regional cooperation. If you take the Maghreb, it's not the East, I'm fully aware, but the Maghreb is probably the least developed region in the world. But even if you take the South Caucasus, I believe if we bottom up start to work on cross-border cooperations, on cross-border projects, of course, first of all, at a very small scale, it might improve the overall situation in the region. And may I say, many people would think we are or I'm naive. I think in politics, you have to be at least a little bit naive in order to achieve something. Because if you make always the assessments why certain things are not possible and have never changed, this all we know. Yeah? But I think you need a certain naivety in order to open a door if there's a possibility to open the door. So we have to try it again and again in order to improve the situation. We cannot accept certain situations. We cannot accept that frozen conflicts are always frozen conflicts, that a non-relationship between neighbors remains forever. So this is something where we as Europeans have a huge interest to improve the situation, because once again, it's about our own neighborhood. It's about our own peace and stability. If there is peace, stability, and prosperity in our neighborhood, it's also our own interest, because then we have peace and stability and prosperity in Europe itself. And this is what leads us, what guides us. And in that respect, I think the Riga Summit was an important event also because we agreed about 4 areas which on which we will focus in the future. It's about state building. In all our neighboring countries, we are still facing deficiencies in the capacities, administration, and rule of law, and all these areas. It's about connectivity, which means in the area of transport, energy, and things like that. It's also about mobility. And finally, of course, it's about prosperity, which means increased economic relationships. The founding idea of the European Union was to strengthen economic relations in order to create peace and stability. And may I say, the European concept was finally a very successful one. And therefore, in that respect, I think it's justified to try to export this very successful example and to help our neighbors to have peace and stability. And it's about our people we have to serve. And these people have the right to live in freedom, peace, stability, and not in any kind of danger and personal risks. I think we as Europeans have an obligation to complete 1989, and we are not yet there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. You started out by talking about expectations. So let me start out by asking you about expectations. It seems to me when I talk to some of the partner countries, they quite naturally had higher hopes for certain elements moving forward in the partnership, particularly in visa liberalization and, as you well know, membership perspective. That won't surprise you at all. When I look at the statement coming out of the Riga Summit, it's very strong on the things that you talked about, on the mechanisms for moving the partnership forward. But we are also in this other world now, where there are strong external pressures, as you acknowledged in your discussions of Armenia and Azerbaijan. Is this stock-taking event, is that sufficient for the current political environment? Should the EU and the partners be doing more? Are there things that, or was Riga not the place to do it and we should be doing it somewhere else in order to address some of the very difficult political context in which the partnership is now working?
I think what has maybe a little bit changed in the past few months, and I personally, I'm, if you like, a kind of representative, is to follow a more pragmatic approach, not to overload and not to be too visionary. I think it's clear where we would like to end up, and it's up to our neighbors to decide. I mean, when we are demanding the free choice of our people to decide about their future, then we have to respect decisions in the different countries, how to shape and to structure their cooperation with us. And I think we need a step-by-step development. I mean, President Poroshenko of Ukraine has said a couple of months ago, and I think he has repeated it several times, last time I think yesterday in the Rada, he clearly expressed the European perspective of his country and the aim to become member of the European Union. But, and that's why I'm saying, he said a couple of months ago, he is fully aware that his country has to make a lot of reforms. He was talking about 40 to 60s in order to submit a membership application, which is serious taken by the European members. And he was talking about 2020. This is in political terms.
To submit the application?
To submit the application. I mean, in political terms, this is, I don't know how many years, I mean, in political terms. But there's a clear vision, and there is a clear understanding that they have to make their homeworks. We have to help them, we have to assist them. The whole, not only European, but international community should assist them, but we should not overstretch them in their political, economical, and societal opportunities.
Let me open this to the audience. Thank you. Wait for the microphone, and then we'll take this gentleman here, and then you're next, okay? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Meto Koloski, UMD. Just a quick comment and a question. That particular ambassador from the EU referring to the country as that particular country has a name, Macedonia, and I think one of the main reasons of why we're in the situation we are today is because of the lack of EU action on this situation with Macedonia's integration into Euro-Atlantic institutions. And so I apologize that you inherited this problem, Commissioner Hahn, and have to deal with it. But you were just in Skopje. And so in June, you're going to have your foreign ministerial council and presidency. And so are there going to be any decisions to open any chapters, perhaps to give a greater carrot to this country in order to eventually join and see the future instead of looking towards Russia or other areas of the world?
You're right. I have to say the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia is probably the best, but in a negative sense, example what can happen if and how a country can drift away if the so-called European perspective is not finally given, including, by the way, the Euro-Atlantic perspective too, because in 2005 they get the candidate status as a possible future member of the European Union, and in 2008 there was a kind of promise or indication to join the NATO. Both things didn't happen, and the consequences can be seen. So what is necessary, and this was the reason why I was so engaged, and by the way, not only because I feel it is a moral obligation, but also it's not only about the country itself, it's about the region. One should not underestimate the geopolitical or impact if this country would not function with its ethnic tensions or ethnic elements in it. So there we have a huge interest to settle this. And in order to keep at least the European perspective alive, for the time being it's necessary to deal and to address the domestic deficiencies and problems. Now we have to speak of a very serious internal crisis, and I hope with the agreement of Tuesday we have met a significant step forward, also because we have offered them, if you like, as a carrot, but as a stick at the same, that we would look into the country and its performance in the area of fundamentals as we would do it if we would negotiate with them. So we have in the European Union the so-called chapters 23 and 24 when we are negotiating with member states, with future member states, their possible accession, and these two capitals, or these two chapters dealing with rule of law, freedom of media, independence of judiciary, etc. And we will apply this methodology, and at the same time we will prepare the new elections which have been agreed in order to have fair, transparent, and traceable elections. And I hope this can contribute to stabilize the country and to bring it back to the European or the Euro-Atlantic perspective.
Thank you. Yes, right here.
Mr. Hahn, my name is Jan Błajewski, journalist from Voice of America. I have the same question on the same topic. After meeting with political leaders in Macedonia on Tuesday, you announced a breakthrough agreement for early elections for April 2016. That's your statement. However, would you elaborate who is going to organize those elections, given the huge amount of allegations of wrongdoing on part of current government officials and political leaders, and the level of mistrust that exists in Macedonia? Did you discuss with Macedonian counterparts, position of opposition, of the government, of NGOs, of Albanian leaders? And secondly, did you talk, or you plan to talk with US officials regarding the situation in Macedonia? Thank you.
First of all, this agreement, and I will come to some elements of it, was signed not only by the Prime Minister as representative of the biggest party, but also by the opposition leader, but also by the two leaders of the two Albanian parties. So this agreement was signed by the representatives of the four main parties in the country. And it was, if you like, witnessed by the ambassador of the European Union and by the US ambassador, who finally joined us, and it was very helpful to have him there in order, so to say, also to represent the view of the United States, which was very helpful in this concrete moment. I'm fully aware about the situation in the country, and there were a lot of discussions also between opposition and government, what is the most appropriate time for new elections, because indeed it's about a sound preparation of it. I mean, there are some deficiencies. We have to modify the electoral code. We have to see, we have to look into the voters list and in some other elements. But on the other hand, I have to say, also the last election, like many other elections in the country, in the region, have been monitored by OSCE. And there was, in general, a positive report, of course, addressing one or the other deficiencies, but in general, it was a positive report. And these elections were only in April last year. So there is a huge scandal which nobody can ignore, or and I mean, if there are 22,000 wiretapes, this is not something which can be ignored. This is a huge scandal, not to speak about the content which was wiretaped, which is something else. Our understanding is there must be a twofold reaction on that. The one is the political one. That's why we are urging the opposition to move back into the parliament and to address this issue in a thorough and usual political debate in the parliament, to have inquiry committees, etc., but also, of course, it's a criminal case, and this criminal case has to be addressed according to international European standards. That's why we have offered, and this has also been accepted by the partners, international experts which are addressing these issues, and all the parties have agreed to accept and to implement all recommendations which are given by the European Commission, in particular when it comes to rule of law and independence of judiciary. And in order to have not only the analysis but also the implementation, we need some time, and therefore we have agreed about elections only in April next year. Also, some others wanted to have it earlier.
Can I ask, this is a very impressive record of getting an agreement. It's not an easy political context in which that was operating, and I doubt the Prime Minister really was enthusiastic about elections. How do you accomplish that in terms of the power of the EU or the penalties that can be assessed if you don't, if they don't agree? I mean, you've gotten them to agree to quite an extensive series of steps of action.
I wouldn't say it was quite easy. It was quite easy in the way that I was pretty clear and blunt that if there is no decision, if there is no movement, and it has to be in June, I don't see any possibility to give another recommendation in our annual progress report to ask our member state to start negotiations. We have this done 6 times in a row in the past 6 years, and this would be something which would be unable for us to repeat. And probably this was the strongest argument, because it's about the European perspective, and linked to that, to a certain extent, also the Euro-Atlantic perspective. Because when it comes to NATO membership, we have a similar situation with Montenegro. NATO relies a lot on our assessment when it comes to rule of law standards, and here we have a division of work in terms of how to implement things in the different areas, and therefore the government is pretty clear. And by the way, there was a forecast of economic growth for 2015 of 4.5%, but due to this internal domestic crisis, the forecast dropped down to 0, because many foreign investors have put their decisions on hold. And I mean, this country is facing an unemployment rate of 27%. Youth unemployment is more than 50%. They have a migration of young people. So the government is pretty clear about the situation and has now recognized and acknowledged the seriousness of the situation.
Thank you. Let me get Rich back there, and then you.
Rich Koslerich from George Mason University. I'd like to ask your view on human rights and freedom of expression. All of the 6 countries in varying degrees have major issues in that area. And I'm thinking particularly of Azerbaijan, where there are over 100 political prisoners still languishing in Azeri custody. This is a challenge both for the U.S. and for Europe. Traditionally, we've relied on non-government organizations and independent media as a way of advancing the values-based relationship that we have. Yet, in this particular case, neither are there to work with. How do you see in the future advancing our goals in the area of human rights and independent media, either as Europe or as the U.S. independently are working together?
You are right. The situation is, I would say, more serious than in Belarus. Secondly, in particular, the situation of civil society organizations is very tough. Not only that many of them indeed are prisoned, but also the legal situation of civil society organization is very problematic. It's for us really impossible to provide financial assistance. So it's not easy to help them. But nevertheless, we try to help them, to assist them. Whenever I'm in these countries and also in Azerbaijan, I try to meet, and it always was possible so far, representatives from the civil society organization. I also have addressed this issue in my meeting with President Aliyev, and I know that not all, so to say, representatives from Western governments are addressing this issue in bilateral contexts. But I have done it because also here I see a moral obligation. I think the first short-term issue is definitely to stabilize the situation, to avoid a further deterioration of the situation. Secondly, Azerbaijan has, just as I said in my introduction, submitted a proposal about a future cooperation with us. And as we have asked for that, or as we have demanded it, there is a chapter dealing with fundamentals and human rights. But we have to see, and I cannot give for the time being any further informations because we couldn't really study it. And finally, in the medium and long term, I believe the government of Azerbaijan is fully aware that they cannot rely forever on oil and gas. They are now pretty rich, although the economic situation this year might be a very tough one. So they are fully aware they have to widen the scope of business activities. I think the Gulf countries are to a certain extent a model for them. Mm-hmm. And if they try to widen their business activities, so to say, the main partners are Europe and the United States. And then we might have a hook. So we have to be clear. We have also to be serious to us and our friends and partners that we don't have that leverage like we have it in a country which wants to become a member of the Union. So this is clearly, I have to be fair. I cannot enforce something if the other side doesn't want anything. But this is the situation. Nevertheless, for us, fundamentals are not negotiable.
Thank you. Over here. And I'll ask for shorter questions, as I saw a number of other hands up.
Short question also on Azerbaijan. Can
you put the mic up close?
If you listen to the popular opinion in Azerbaijan, there's a lot of talk of double standards on the part of European partners when talking about territorial integrity of Azerbaijan versus other European partnership, Eastern Partnership members. So how would you address that? In other words, there are strong statements about territorial integrity, so for example, of Ukraine and also Georgia, but not of Azerbaijan, which is pretty much in similar situation. So how would you comment on that? Thank you.
Well, also here, I think we should look into the different international agreements. And I would say both sides have not really implemented all the agreements which are there for at least 20 years. It's about for instance, organizing a referendum and things like that. So that's why I believe we can only change the situation, as I said, by a bottom-up approach, trying to improve the situation in the region, having more bilateral activities, contacts, projects, probably not immediate in the contested area, but in other parts, and this has to be addressed. And I think also in my contacts with the representative of Azerbaijan, they are concerned about the situation, but I think there are also other projects which gain more attention, and I'm talking here about the Southern Gas Corridor, which is probably the top priority for the moment, which doesn't mean we can forget this conflict, quite the other way around. We have to see if we can find a solution. But first of all, it's about confidence-building measures on the ground, and it also depends, like always in life and also in politics, on acting people. And for the time being, I don't see an immediate solution.
Right over here.
Thank you. Asta Benonis with the Lithuanian American community. Mr. Hans, I know you're a diplomat, so I don't expect a direct answer to my question, but I think I'll try anyway. It could be that Dr. Burwell's comment at the beginning that the EU summit in Riga was just not the format for it will be the ultimate answer. Here's the question. There is a war raging in Europe right now. Ukraine is being attacked. It brings to mind 20 years ago Kosovo. And was there any recognition in Riga at all that there is a war going on and that one of your partners is incapable of meeting any of these pragmatic suggestions that you give them or measures that you're giving them because they're fighting for their existence? And people, there's what, of those 4 million refugees you spoke of, at least 1.5 million must be Ukrainians, correct?
Yeah, concerning the figures, there are around 1.5, at least 1.5 internal displaced people. Around nearly 1 million people have migrated to Russia, and there are nearly 100,000 in Belarus. Once again, nobody will, can, and should ignore the conflict, quite the opposite. I mean, we are talking so much about sovereignty, territorial sovereignty, and clearly Russia has violated international law. So it's not only a European issue, it's an international issue, and that's why the international community is so worried about that. And of course, we have to address this issue, and I think that against any odds, the European family has managed not only to introduce sanctions, but also to keep it and to be clear on that. Also, there are always internally the one or the other discussions, but finally we are clear and nobody is, so to say, deviating from this path. I think indicates that there should be no doubts. So the first aim, nevertheless, must be to stabilize the situation in eastern Ukraine. For instance, what we can see the past 24 hours is something which more than concerns us, this heavy violation, and more than that, that apparently heavy weapons are again brought back into the region. So definitely this is something which is not acceptable, but one has also to see what is, so to say, stimulated from outside and what is, so to say, really created from inside Donbass. And this, nevertheless, so the conflict is the one thing, but we cannot ignore the general economic situation of Ukraine in general, if you like. So we have to address this. We are talking about 35 million people. We have already provided, as European Union, more than 6 million euro in the past 2-3 years to assist Ukraine. The international community has raised a lot of money. There is a calculation that till 2017-18, there's an additional need of 42 million euro, which is a calculation or assessment by the International Monetary Fund. And this is shared or accepted by everybody. But we have to see it's not acceptable for us to have a situation where we have permanently to finance a country, because this is not affordable for us. I have to admit it. The country is too big that we can finance it forever. So we have to address the economic situation, the macroeconomic situation, but we are fully aware about the sensitivity of the situation, about the fact that the country is in a war. It is, no doubt about. But unfortunately, and this is a particular challenge for the government, and it's a huge challenge, they have to deal with the conflict and they have to deal with the economic recovery of the country or of the rest of the country, huge rest of the country.
Thank you. Let me get a question here.
Alexei Nevsky, Voice of America, Ukrainian Service. Mr. Hans, I have a question. How EU is going to fight Russian propaganda, which is still fueling the conflict in eastern Ukraine, and it's pretty much trying to create an issue in Europe? Thank you.
Usually I would say, if I'm talking about a strategy, it's no longer a strategy. Yeah? So that's why I can say we are fully aware about the situation, but I mean, this is the difference to a country like Russia, where apparently the president can give order to invest that amount of money and to produce programs and channels, etc. In a free society, an independent society. We are in that respect not on a totally equal level playing field, but I believe in the better ideas, in the fact that our concept is the stronger one, is the more attractive one. I mean, the fact that 7% of world population, and this is the number of the more than 500 million inhabitants of Europe, are still able to produce by far the biggest economic outcome of a region in the world, 23%, demonstrates clearly that apparently our societal concept is a very strong one. And it seems to be that we are extremely attractive. Otherwise, we would not receive so many, if you like, applications to join us. We are often criticized about our soft powerness, but apparently nothing is so attractive than our soft power. And that's why I believe on the European idea, on the European spirit, and if we are able to make Ukraine as a success story, this will have huge implication for the whole region, also towards Russia, and I hope in a positive way that they recognize we are not looking to get territories. We are looking to have peace, prosperity, and cooperation.
Thank you. The last question over here. Obi, wait for the mic.
Yeah, thank you very much for being here with us at the Atlantic Council.
And introduce yourself.
Obi Moore with Denton's Law Firm. Thank you very much, Commissioner Hahn, for being here with us at the Atlantic Council. Going back to the enlargement issue, is there a new policy or relevancy that you believe that the EU has taken on following the crisis in Ukraine? Because after the EU enlargement of 27, certainly from the perspective of foreign direct investors, there was a lull really in going forward and making the improvements necessary to be able to allow the remaining countries of southeastern Europe improve their infrastructure, and particularly as you focused on Macedonia, rule of law and independence of the judiciary, which are two critically important issues, because the more stability, obviously, in each country, the more foreign direct investment that is willing to come to those countries. So is there a new relevancy and commitment that the EU now has to finish the enlargement process of the remaining countries in southeastern Europe that investors can rely on and start to look at and help participate in?
You have said something very important. It's about the process. And although my official name is Commissioner for Enlargement Negotiations and Neighborhood, I think one should understand our relevant activities when it comes to enlargement, that we are acting so that it's about the process and not about negotiations, but simply to take over the acquis communautaire is the one thing, but to really change cultural behavior, certain procedures is something different. Give you an example. In all these countries, we have more or less state-of-the-art legislation concerning fight against corruption in force. But it's about the sustainable implementation of this legislation to prove the changes in this respect. Because you will only attract more foreign investors if there is a much lower level of corruption. I'm not so naive I can turn it down to 0%, because even in the other parts of Europe it's not 0% and probably nowhere in the world, but significantly. Rule of law, independence of judiciary, freedom of media, all these are important elements which also attracts foreign investors. And this is exactly the argument I tried to pass my partners in the region. When it comes to implementation of fundamentals, it should not be seen as something per se, but there is a clear link to the attractiveness of a country for foreign investors, but by the way also for domestic investors. Young persons or not so young persons will never fund a company, risk their own money, etc., if they cannot rely on the judiciary system. So this means, nevertheless, that it takes some time. And the second thing is that it's also about the economic performance of a country, also related to what I have said previously. Why? Because if you like it or not, if you look in all the opinion polls in the European Union, I think there is no member, no country of the European Union where the citizens are in favor of new members, or where a majority of citizens is not in favor. Why? Because probably as a result and outcome of the current economic crisis, they believe a new member is an additional financial burden. And in order to convince our own citizens, we have to demonstrate and to prove that a new member is an added value and is not a burden. And it's only an added value if the economic performance is on a similar level than the average of the European Union members already today. And this also includes acceptable level, for instance, in the areas of fundamentals. And this is, by the way, the reason why we nowadays start negotiations with candidate countries by starting negotiations on the fundamentals and completing negotiations on the fundamentals. So for us, the litmus test is always how this kind of, for us, very important topics are implemented in a country. And therefore, it takes time. With Croatia, we have, so to say, negotiated 7 years. And if it is once again understood as a process, it's clear that in this mandate of the Commission, a new member state, a new accession will not be possible, but it doesn't mean we have stopped our activities, quite the opposite. We have simply readjusted our way how we prepare our future members so that from the day one of their membership, they are real full members. But once again, in particular, the Western Balkans are natural members, future members of the European Union, and there is no different view on that amongst our heads of states and relevant political elite.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. It's clear from this that you have an incredibly complex portfolio. And even though we started out talking about the Riga Summit and the Eastern Partnership and then moved to the Balkans, we still haven't talked about the other area, the South, the southern neighborhood. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Atlantic Council has a project funded by the delegation on US-EU cooperation on Arab transitions. So sometime we'll have to have you back to talk about the southern neighborhood. But I just wanted to thank you for a very comprehensive portrait of the comprehensive process that gets countries in Europe to change, and the influence, the soft power of the EU in that process. It's not always glamorous, and there will always be questions about the perceptions and expectations. But it's also true that every time I look at the ambassadors who are sitting here in the front rows at Atlantic Council events, I'm struck by how many countries have made that transition, thanks to the EU and the work of you and your predecessors. So thank you.
Thank you very much.